My name is Nerissa Street. I am a founder of Juneteenth for Joy. It's our third annual Juneteenth for Joy festival. Juneteenth is actually June 19th. And there's a beautiful history behind it. But today we are very excited to have with us a few amazing people who've been helping create the visual story, the visual experience for Juneteenth for Joy. I'm very excited that we have Tre Seals, who will be joining us.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going. We have also coming to the microphone with us today talking about how to decolonize your eyes. We have Niki Lopez. Today we're talking Black Joy by Design, decolonizing your eyes. Very grateful to have two visual powerhouses. I think that's the way to say it. Two visual powerhouses with us, and we have a third person coming as well. And we're on chatting about what it takes to be very intentional about the visual story, and having a visual story that is equitable, that represents everyone, and is true at the same time. I think I'm gonna come up with new ways to say visual awesomeness. I'm gonna continue to come up with new ways to say visual awesome, visual gurus, visual storytellers, feasts for your eyes, from these amazing professionals, and really just excited to have you with us today. So I'm going to introduce to the folks. First, we have Niki Lopez. So Niki Lopez is an Afro-Latina, queer, award-winning, disciplinary visual artist, curator, social practitioner, advocate, and cultural programmer. Lopez is best known for her vibrant color palette, as you can see behind her, if those of you are watching. This is going to be such a beautiful thing to look at, folks, those of you who are watching. And she's also known for her masks, her exhibitions, and a collection of works dealing with trauma and healing through the arts. Nicole Lopez is the founder of What's Your Elephant, a movement that creates a sacred space and uses the arts to address the unspoken. Lopez produces The Circle, a video podcast sharing stories of the creative community local to her. And she also speaks to activists and social entrepreneurs. Niki's advocacy includes mental health, self-care, and learning to swim. And she is a mind-body medicine practitioner. We will welcome Niki Lopez.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And so we also have with us, and this is brilliant, we also have with us Tre Seals. So Tre Seals, this is the first time we're meeting in visual person. I'm going to try to come up with more words. But I just like the word. It just sounds really nice. So, but here's what I've got from you. You are a designer based on the East Coast. And from the beginning, you were set on the path to become the designer you are today. From kindergarten to third grade, you practiced writing in cursive until your handwriting looked like the sample sheets, which is pretty cool. In the 5th and 6th grade, you started your first creative venture, graffitiing people's names in index cards, laminating them, and selling them for $3 a piece. So he knew what he wanted from the very beginning. And am I using the right gender pronouns?
Yes.
I want to make sure. I am. Okay, great. Just checking. So in high school, he designed tattoos. At the age of 20, Seals made a pact with himself that by the age of 25, he would become an internationally renowned designer. And guess what, folks? He is. Okay, so 4 months after graduating from college, he founded his company. Less than a year later, the Font Foundry Vocal Type not only crafts industry-shattering typefaces, and we're going to talk about typefaces, fonts, designs, all that kind of stuff, but also works with a variety of nonprofit organizations, and ours is one of them. So you have been recognized as the youngest ascender by the Type Directors Club, a Black trailblazer by the Dots, and has been featured in Print, How, Communication Arts magazines, and more, which says a lot about you as a designer. So that is amazing. So, ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between, please welcome Tre Seals.
Thank you.
And also we have Schessa.
Hello.
Garbutt.
Hi, it's
Excited. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm just very excited for this weekend and all of the festivities and celebrations of us. So I'm in a good place.
Oh, this is awesome. We're excited to have you with us. This is going to be a very, very fun live discussion talking about decolonizing the eyes, Black joy by design. So let me introduce, and I'm going to ask you to correct my pronunciation, Schessa Garbutt.
No, that's it. You did it. Yeah.
Okay. Schessa Garbutt, they, them, is a creative director and type designer based in Inglewood, California. They write and speak on topics of diversity in design education and decolonizing our creative practices. You're in the right place. They are currently working on a forthcoming anthology of QT BIPOC near futurism art and writing called Time and the Travelers. So big Octavia Butler fan right here. So, ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between, please welcome Schessa Garbutt. Woo, sparkle fingers. You are the visual team that has made this project, Juneteenth for Joy. You all are the visual team that has made Juneteenth for Joy the phenomenal visual wonderland that it is. Like, it's been my joy to, like, all the visuals. Every time I see them, I get all excited because so pretty, so beautiful, so pretty, so beautiful. So you're definitely a big part of Joy by Design. So I want you to lean in on that. And we'll start first so that people know what it is that you're doing. And this is for everyone. How did you get into your line of visual business? So I'll start with the person who's closest to me. That's Tre.
Goodness, that's quite a journey. Well, you already heard most of it from my bio. Started my first business in the 5th grade, graffitiing people's names on index cards for $3. So I guess my typography journey really begins there. And that's what really got me interested in type. So by the time I got to my senior year of high school, I'd already started drafting my first font. I had no understanding of type design, but I figured one day I would and be able to actually digitize it and make it an actual font, which I did in 2013 during my sophomore year of college. And I've been interested in type design ever since, in typography ever since. But fast forward to 2016, I had already been freelancing throughout college, graduated in 2015 with a job offer to work for a staffing agency, and while also freelancing after hours, making brand identities. And when you're making like a logo, website, branding projects like that, you pretty much go through the same process of searching for inspiration and trying to find the perfect font for this brand and for their website and everything in between. And after going through that process about 100 times by 2016, I got really bored. And it was like everything I saw, no matter how beautiful, it all looked the same. And somehow I came across this article about diversity in the graphic design industry, and I found out that only 3% of designers in America were Black, which is why everything looked the same, because you weren't having these diverse perspectives in the mix. And that inspired me to look to my past and my history of type and come up with a font foundry. I've always been a huge fan of type and history. So I wanted to merge those two loves together to form vocal type. So each font that I make is based on the histories and progressive movements of different underrepresented cultures, from the civil rights movement, Chicano rights movement, and everything in between.
So for those who don't know, font foundry, what is a foundry?
So it's actually a very, very old term. So back in the day, font foundries were companies, well, let me back up. Font companies had to actually melt down metal to make lead letter blocks. And they were called foundries because of all that heavy metal work that they had to do. And the name is kind of stuck with font companies today. So foundry, company are pretty much one and the same because we're not melting type anymore. But font foundry is just a font company, and we produce letters essentially.
Okay. So the name stuck, and I think that's the same with a lot of things that we have, where we were working with things tangibly, and the name for the tangible process now has transferred to what's digital. So that's what happened for you, is what you're saying with the word foundry.
Definitely.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So Schessa, how'd you get into your line of work?
Yeah. I was also always a creative kid and really lucky that my mom encouraged that. And she was like, if this is the thing you want to be good at, go forth, be great. So always very grateful for that. But in high school, I was kind of the go-to person if our class needed like a t-shirt made, or if somebody wanted to make a poster. I was in yearbook for a couple of years, and so learning layouts, learning InDesign. My yearbook teacher was like, you want to do a weird layout for Halloween, like go ahead, like don't let me stop you. So I took sort of that passion for graphic design specifically into college, and I got my start in branding when I volunteered for an organization that takes kids that live in historic South Central Los Angeles up to summer camp for a week, and they needed a new logo. So I was like, I'm getting a arts degree, like I can lead this ad hoc committee, and that was the first time I did a rebranding process, and it was so much fun, and a time that I look back on fondly, and I learned so much through, and having that intersection of impact or an organization and a cause that I cared about with my design and creativity sparked something in me that stayed with me. So graduating from school, I did the startup thing for a while. I worked at a branding and design agency for a while, and then in 2020 I was like, this is a great year to start doing my own thing. Little did I know. But it's been 2 years now, and it's just been such an incredible journey, and I am learning so much every week about my role and what my role can be. And this past year, 2021, I got my certificate in type design from Type West, which is a program through the Letterform Archive. It was internet school, it was all online, but I learned so much about the history of type, the history, one specific, speaking of decolonizing our eyes, one specific sort of take on the history of type, and ended up writing an essay about that, which is in the Black Experience in Design. The essay is called and Provoking Type. So it was my sort of, me in conversation with myself and in conversation with mentors like Tre and with my teachers and my classmates, really thinking about what are our reference points. A lot of type is referential, as Tre said. Like, we're referring to history, we're referring to the way that letters have been shaped before, because that's the letters people recognize. So I won't get too deep into that. But where I'm at now is I work for myself it's a team of 2, and we're called Firebrand, and we are a branding and graphic design studio.
Wow, that's amazing. And I think people really don't understand the threads, so I think these things, they start as interests. You're like, oh, I like to draw, or I like to make letters, and then that is a life. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't realize that when something is calling you in that way, that if you follow that thread, it becomes your life. So interesting. So next, Niki Lopez, how'd you get into your line of design?
So I've always been a creative since I was little. I used to hold crayons and make, and I think I've always been an entrepreneurial spirit. Like, my grandmother kept art pieces of mine that I did when I was like 5 or 6, and it's like 25 cents, but today it's on sale for 10 cents, and my family would buy it and give me the money, but stuff the art back in my drawer. So I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I've always, I had a list since I was little of all these things I wanted to be when I grew up, and most of them were creative stuff. And gratefully, I've touched on most of that list, art, design, dance, different things like that. So I grew up in this sort of religious community type thing that was really kind of crazy. But one of the things that I wasn't even really aware of is that it was a pro-Black community that, was very much into like any publications, there was Black images, because it talked about the power of imagery and the subconscious subliminal messaging with media and all those things. And so, once, as a teenager, the minute that, anyone got whiff that I was into art, because I used to draw all the time, I was immediately dumped into the art department. And this older lady taught me like old school graphic design, like acetate overlays, non-repo pen, cutting out each letter because there was no computer. So, that's how long, without giving away my 21-year age, my 21, without giving out my age, that I've been doing design, creative work, painting, drawing and different things like that. And so I've always done graphic design. I mean, I was on Adobe when it was Aldus, then it was Adobe One, like forever. Fast forward to like in my 20s or 30s, at some point I wanted to get a degree in, a degree just to have under my belt. Because even though I grew up in doing it, I wanted to learn the terminology and all those things. So I went in and got involved with Art Institute, and, they said, well, if you like art and you're good at computers, maybe you should consider graphic design. So I got a bachelor's in graphic design and desktop publishing. And for me, I've always felt that I wanted to, be independent. I did try little jobs here and there. It didn't matter if the job was good, great, bad, or indifferent. It never lasts. So several years ago, I finally said, you know what, let me just take the full leap and be fully independent and do that. And so for me, I've always been accustomed to Black imagery or the lack thereof. And one of the things I'm always, when I would talk with certain clients, I deal with a lot of nonprofits, organizations, people, things like that. And everybody shouts diversity and inclusion, or like, oh, I have this party, but the Black people not coming from it. And I'm like, let me see your flyer. That's why. Look at your flyer. So I'm constantly, it's not just saying diversity and inclusion and checking off that box on a grant to get the money. It's in your images. When people say diversity and inclusion, or I see social media, I'm immediately scrolling through to see how far do I have to scroll before I see a person of color, different people, and diversity comes in a lot of different layers. So a lot of times me trying to, one, be the example, so making sure that I'm taking up space visually and on social media with, I'm very proud Black, Afro-Latina, queer, lesbian, mom, independent, all the intersectionalities, I'm just like, I want to normalize it, and not from an egotistical point of view, but it's just like, if I know I want to do better and be that example for others, and just kind of training people in terms of like, instead of complaining of what's not missing, we could create those things and put it out there. So that's kind of my wheelhouse of like doing those things especially when I don't see it. And using, for me, it was always, I consider myself a creative advocate. So everything is under the umbrella of creative advocacy, art with a purpose, things that are having movement. I mean, there's enough people that, here's this pretty flower and things like that. I want to be able to create impact. I want to inspire and empower other people, either by what I'm doing or inspire them to do their own thing or collaboration. So that's kind of always a thing. I've always freelanced. I've always kind of got to a cause. And for me, my way of giving back is like, let me design this thing. This looks horrible. Like, oh my God, that's so many colors. Oh my God, look at the imagery, like putting out these images. So
she's saying that because she's saying that. So folks, I'm just letting you know. So this team that you see in front of you, those of you who are watching, hi, everybody who's jumped on board and seeing. So we are talking about the visual approach to Black joy, right? So Black joy by design, decolonizing your eyes. She's specifically talking about, that looks horrible. This beautiful visual that we have here has everything to do with this designer here. As part of the Building Black Utopias project, we specifically reached out to beautiful Black designers, visual gurus like Niki Lopez, who's been doing our graphics and our messaging there, but also Schessa, Garbutt, and Tre Seals, who are specifically doing the signage for our in-person event. So your work, we were very intentional about connecting with the gurus who understood this is not just about diversity and checking things off. This is about making sure that even down to the font, that we're intentional about the messaging and the imaging. So talking about that intentionality, I know specifically Niki saying she looked at the visuals, but it was me. It was me, and I said, and so yeah, it just, but the conversation about the intentionality. So I want to circle back to my type designers, my font foundries, my verbal letter gurus. And it's more than that, right? Like you got to do punctuation too. Like I'm thinking about all the things that we don't really think about. But you said, Tre, 3%?
Yes.
So talk to me about representation mattering. How do we support the design, like we can hire Black graphic designers, but I wasn't even thinking about the visuals on the verbal. Like, how do we support you and Schessa being these beautiful graphic, and I wish I could show people the graphics, the fonts, because and the types, they're vibrant. So talk to me about how do we support you, and also Schessa, I want to hop that to you too.
Most definitely. I think going back to that idea that there are only 3 to 3.5% of graphic designers in America are Black, I feel like that goes back to high school. I feel like there are people out there who, I think it's a privilege, let me back up, knowing that these industries exist and that these career paths are an option and that they exist. That's a privilege in its own right. And I feel like there are so many people in our communities who don't know that these areas of design, or that design exists. When you see someone drawing, you think that the only avenue they have is to become an artist. Not many people see beyond that. So encouraging people who want to get into the arts and exploring all these different career paths, I feel like is step one, diversifying the design industry and getting more people interested in this industry. But as for supporting local type and other Black type designers, correct me, Schessa, if I'm wrong, I feel like there's only a dozen or so Black type designers that are actually practicing today.
Wow.
Yeah, and just being aware of that when you choose what types you want to use for your projects. Like me and some of my friends talk about all the time how the Black Lives Matter logo was made by a white designer. There's that disconnect that people aren't aware of, like those tiny details that people aren't aware of that aren't Black made. So doing that type of diligent research in your practice and whatever projects you have going on, I feel like is a great first step to not only supporting Schessa and I, but other Black designers out there.
Wow, so that's a miss. That's a miss. That I didn't even think about. But I will say that as a sometimes as a nonprofit person, and so I work as I work with a fiscally sponsored organization. So a shout out to the Center for Social Change who fiscally sponsored this project. And I know sometimes what you do is you just whoever's willing to do it, right? And so that, not saying that that's what happened.
Yeah.
But I know sometimes that's a thing. But I think you're right. We just have to be aware of the numbers, like and work to amplify the story. So now, those of you who are listening, even if you hopped on for me or if you hopped on for one of the other people in our live, you now know about everyone else. We're going to amplify your social media tags. At our live event, we've actually, and I can't wait to send you guys pictures of this. We're creating these little placards next to your signs.
Oh, wow.
That tell about where the fonts of the signs came from. So after this live, I'm actually going to hop over to the print shop and get those placards, because those signs are going to be installed on the beach, on a historic Black beach in Florida. So I can't wait to take pictures of that and send it to you all, and hopefully that's something you all can use.
Throw something out there of what you said, right? Where you said nonprofits, we just kind of grab to who's available, who we know. And I talk a lot about the danger in that, right? If we could sit on a panel and talk about how societal norms was not meant to be equal for everyone, right? So all of these things, the power that be, it's not broken, it's functioning how it's supposed to be. But if we that we need to change that, we can't just go to what we're used to seeing, who we know. We have to challenge ourselves, and each time, who would I normally go out to? Okay, why? Are they doing these things? Can I reach out to somebody else? Can I tap into someone else who might be a little bit more conscious? When we're spending our dollars, and not just dollars, giving people platforms, how can we use the dollars, the platforms, our privilege, our leverage to help shift the change and break that norm? Because even with grants, right? I've been told with a grant, well, we would rather someone we actually knew, but that's part of the problem, right? So we have to always, at every level, top down, bottom down, sideways, constantly be checking in and seeing that we're making the right choices for the movement that we say, well, we know the system is messed up because it does not see us all as equal. And is my choice right now aligning with the change I want to see, or the norm that I'm used to or could afford or feel is easy access?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what he said is so true, and also what Tre said is so true. One of the ways to support current professional sort of active designers of color and Black designers is, as a white designer, as a white person in a nonprofit or in an organization, when you see them saying, hey, this project is coming up, we need a designer for this, or we need a copywriter for this, putting those Black names at the top of the list, making your list a list of all Black designers and creatives, right? It's, I think there's that phrase of like, be a voice for the voiceless, but now the idea of that is shifting where it's like, no, actually like pass the mic to those people because they have things to say. And the way that a Black designer will approach a social impact project or a project for a Black community is totally different. We're coming from actual lived experience versus what is my idea of like what of the visuals of Black people. I don't want to say any more of that. But I appreciate it when allies pass the mic either through a referral or they're like, I'm not the right person to work on this project. You need to assign this project to someone else. You need to reach out to these people.
Yeah.
But also, sorry, I wanted to add to
no, go ahead.
It's also important for allies not to only reach out to us for Juneteenth and Black History Month. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yes.
That is my busiest time, and it's, yeah. I mean, I can't say any more to that, but I find that we're the busiest during Black History Month and Juneteenth, or the month leading up to Juneteenth. And we can do more than that. We have done more than that. It's just a matter of making sure that we get work outside of, not just for the culture.
Right. And I think that is, saying that goes back to the conversation of diversity and inclusion and equity. It's not that I want to amplify you or we should be amplified. Dr. Kim Ray says Black History Month is every month. It's not that we just want to amplify you during those times. It is that you're capable of executing any project, not just the Black History Project, not just the Juneteenth Project. You know, you're capable of doing whatever it is that anyone else can do. And I think one of the things around this, so the project that we're doing that you all are really making look beautiful, I can't wait for you to see these pictures, building Black utopias, transforming red lines into green spaces, right? So being very clear about the fact that you all as professionals happen to be Black, right? And then that means that you can do a project that may center European people. You can do a project that may center Asians. You could do just a general project, right? And so that thought that there is, just because it is something that's amplifying Black excellence doesn't mean that it cannot, it's not universal. So how do we visually, so you gave us some really, great things about making sure that you're not hiring people just for the African-centered project. Or how do we find you?
Or that tokenism.
How do we find you? And Kaola Naima said exactly and better. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we find, let's say we got it, we get the message, right? How do we find Black designers? How do we find Black type designers? Where are you? Let's tell them, because they don't know. They're like, no, I don't know. Where am I finding?
I would say right? Google hashtags, put it out there the same way. How do I, hey, anybody, people go on Facebook, right? I need a doctor for my, my 3-year-old. I need a Black doctor. I want to, I want a female doctor. I want a queer doctor. That's how you do it. Look up hashtags, put it out there. But I think, the consumers need to know that they could look up, and should look up those things first. Like if you already have money to spend and you already need this support or service, you're going to put it somewhere. Start there first. What groups of people are being marginalized? Because just in your buying power, not just buying power, also who you support, right? We talked a lot about people hiring graphic designers of color, but also consumers could go look through hashtags and like and engage with that content as well. That's going to help to uplift it. So it's not just the people who got money to spend, but it's also the people who are consuming, content on social media. They could be adding to it, but also looking and going to highlight and engage that and, push it up, into the social webs of importance.
Okay. And so we just got a comment. Yes, I need to know. Like they want to do it. So push it up in the social web of importance. What are some websites? So I definitely want to make sure I understand we're using Google and everything. What are the websites that I go to find designers? And then, then I can post. So I want to make it as plain as possible.
There are so many directories of various Black creatives. One of them is Where Are the Black Designers? You can post on the job board. Also, if you are a Black designer, you can, go there and look for job opportunities. There's one called Hire Black Designers. I think there's Black Female Photographers, which is a Instagram that I follow. There are lists of Black type designers as well. I don't know the exact URL, unfortunately, but yeah. Tre, I'm sure you can also shout out directories and various things. Those are just the ones I can remember right now.
Yeah, those are actually the same ones for me. There used to be a list of Black type designers, but unfortunately I haven't been able to find it recently. But it's a very strange time for Black type designers. So the history of Black type designers, unfortunately, only goes back to 2005, when like I said, as far as our history tracks back to, when the first Black type designer was quote unquote discovered. And we've been trying to get more Black type designers in the industry ever since. In the wake of George Floyd, there have been BIPOC type design scholarships that have increased that number of Black designers working to become type designers. But unfortunately, there's not much of a list for that.
There's also
interesting
stock photos, nappy.co. So, stock photography that is also extremely white and whitewashed. So like if you're someone that needs images and you're not a photographer, those are other things too. So nappy.co is a stock photography that centers around Black and brown images. And there's some other ones too. I'll get you some lists because I know I had it at some point, and I'll send it to you if you want to share it out after this.
Absolutely. So I want to make sure, I understand sometimes working with allies. So I do a lot of work with allies, right? And this project is supported by allies, right? Building Black Utopias was supported by the Community Foundation of Broward. And they are an ally. So I know that we do want our allies to do the work, right? I also know that I want to lower some barriers too. And so I appreciate the sharing. So we have Where Are the Black Designers, Hire Black Designers, and nappy.co. What other websites? Because I'll share those out as well. And I see someone is, okay. What other designers would you suggest? Did I get all of them? So
I'm sharing this. Another one that comes to mind is Latinx design directory, and I'm sharing it knowing that both Niki and I are Afro-Latino. That's another way to look and find folks. That's maybe an unexpected website, but yeah.
What's the name of it again?
It's Latinx design directory.
Latinx design directory. Thank you. Okay, so we are really excited. I mean, I'm really, really grateful for your time today. I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up. I want to make sure that people know, those of you, people who hopped on for one designer and found 2 more. I'm not a designer. I just like good design. I know what I like. I like this. This is very pretty. I know what I like, and I'm very, very intentional about being surrounded by beautiful, beautiful things created by beautiful people. So what does diversity look like in a design? I said, oh my gosh, so it's Liz Dude says, oh, Blacks Who Design is a good site. And that's by Girl Noticed. Hey, Girl Noticed. So much wisdom, so much knowledge. Thank you. So what does diversity look like in a design? So what does diversity look like visually? I want you to talk about what does it look like in a font. So we used some really beautiful fonts in this project. We have a great write-up on them, and I'm going to see if I can pull up the name of one of them. I want you to talk about what it took for you to create that. So first, I'll start with our graphic designer. Talk to me about what diversity looks like in a design, in your words, and then I'm going to hop over to our type designers, and I want you to talk about one of your fonts. So go ahead, starting with Niki.
Oh, fonts or design?
Design for you.
Oh,
With design for you,
well,
graphic design. What does diversity
so
look like in design? I
diversity
apologize.
for
I know
me,
it's all over the place.
is equity, right? You know, what needs to be uplifted. So I want to have, you know, images that have diverse complexions. I want to highlight images that highlights and uplifts natural hair, right? So many Black people and people of color were made to hate their hair. So for me, I'm going to feature someone with natural hair, whether it's short, whether it's locks or braids, over someone that has a perm or a wig. No offense to those. I understand that those are hairstyles, but for me, it's about uplifting and trying to highlight some of the things that, you know, most people ignore and was told to hate, or that was bad. Different complexions, not just the Disney Black, the light skin curly hair, you know, sorry, Marley, because he's brown skin with curly hair, but, you know, someone who's dark skin and chocolate, you know, make sure you have that. When I see a group of pictures, when I see a picture with a group of people, I don't, you know, like, how do you have 10 people and haven't thought of, especially as an organization, is this image diverse? You know, so I want to see what's normally not there and be able to make sure that I'm doing what I can in my power, whether it's graphic design, whether it's photography, whether it's creating reels, whether it's using a hashtag that's going to amplify marginalized beauty, or, you know, decolonize. Like, okay, yeah, there's already so much in the media. I want to promote and push other stuff. And so that's taking pictures, that's, you know, Black people in different spaces. That's, you know, a lesbian couple that doesn't necessarily have to be interracial, or not even a couple, a lesbian gardening, right? That's diversity right there. Because if you go and look at lesbian images, you know, it's like, it's all coupled, or it's all white couple, then it's the interracial couple, but then the, you know, or you have the person that's Black. So, you know, you have to think of all of those things. Like, what are the messages that we grew up on or that we're aware of? And we make sure that we're constantly, you know, trying to change that.
That's powerful, because I think when we're talking about decolonizing the eye, there is this thing in the eye that amplifies what is, right? So let's look at, so it amplifies what is, because that's normal. We're normalizing the thing that already is, when what is the truth is that what we continue to see in the media isn't really reflective of who's sitting next to me, right? So I appreciate your thinking, you know, just saying, look for images, amplify images, create images that are really just reflective of what's sitting next to you, who's sitting next to you, instead of what is already there. So, Schessa, we're looking at the fonts. I'm really excited about the fonts that you are working with on our project. Thumbelina. Tell us about the development of Thumbelina.
Yeah, sure. Before I jump into it, I would add to Niki's list.
And I apologize. Yes, please add.
Totally. Looking for imagery, folks of different abilities and different ages, not shying away from that. I've had clients literally be like, we don't really like these photos, and when I look at them all together, I'm like, there are elders in all of these photos, and you don't like that they're old, but we need them. They're a part of our communities. So I would add that. In terms of type design and Thumbelina, for me, diversity in type design is diversifying my reference points, diversifying my ideas of what makes a good font. So with Thumbelina, some of my reference points were black letter and uncial lettering. So think, which was, you know, initially like monks with a broad nib pen, and they're doing sort of these very ornate lettering that's like very geometric. It's so hard for me to describe it. Tre, you might have to jump in for me. I'm like, what's a good reference point for black letter? So inspired by sort of pen calligraphy, but then I was also looking at, I wanted there to be like a childlike whimsy and like a warm, magical vibe to the font. So I was also looking at some of my favorite childhood fairy tale books, not being afraid to lean into characteristics that were that are a little bit more feminine or seen as more ornamental. I had somebody in a critique refer to my font as quaint. And I was like, it's moments like that in design where I'm just like, had I had a less tough skin, that might have like put me off from designing type in general. But some of my other references were looking at nature. I love plants. I have, I think, 20 plants in my house. And I love watching new leaves unfurl. So Thumbelina, the font, is, yeah, it's got a flow to the letters. Like the letters aren't all sort of upright or perfectly circular. Some of them have sort of an angle in them, like the A and the N, that make the font very distinctive. And it was, I think it has been really interesting to be intentional about sitting in that tension of what simplifying things down and making sure that the core idea of the font is there, but then also saying, I don't need to make the next Helvetica. That doesn't appeal to my sensibilities as a designer, and we already have many Helvetica-esque fonts. So where does my voice come in? What voices might I represent through this font? And I think ideally those voices are other Black nerds. I would love for a Black D&D or similar sort of tabletop RPG game to use Thumbelina, right? I would love to see it in Black fairy tale movies. I would love to see it used in Black beauty brands. You know, that's sort of where my head's at when I'm considering who my potential audiences might be. I think a lot of what we're told as type designers is type design should be universal and ubiquitous, and you want as many people as possible to use your font. And I think while that's true, the flip side of that is sometimes I want to get really specific, or I want to really speak to a specific subculture or a specific group of folks. And I think it's okay if type does that too. In terms of diversity in type, and this is something I'm still learning, being Afro-Latina, coming from a multilingual, not even just bilingual sort of neighborhood, it's important to me to create fonts that have Spanish language support. I would love for my fonts to be used on websites and in graphics that are doing translations, and for folks to not lose out on the design and the aesthetic just because that font doesn't cover their language or doesn't have the accents that are required. So that's me. I want to hear what Tre has to say.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me, I guess. Diversifying my reference points. I feel like a lot of type designers are really just taught to reference the types that were designed by white guys back in the 1800s and the early 1900s, essentially. And not just improve on them or make my own version of those types, but being inspired by my culture and the type that we see all the time when we learn about our history, but don't really pay attention to. For example, the first font that I released in local type is called BTC Martin, which was inspired by the I Am a Man signs from the Memphis Sand Spike of 1968. And I've always been enamored with those signs, but I never really paid attention to the type until I became a graphic designer and started paying attention to letters on things that I see constantly. And that's pretty much how all my other fonts are created, by looking at source materials from Black history and from Brown history and from suffrage, Chicano rights movements, and just different progressive movements that represent us. So I feel like our culture is all about progress and moving forward, and what's more progressive than protest and policy.
Wait, did you just hear what you just said?
Yeah.
People dropping gems. Are you all listening to these gems? These visual magicians are dropping for you. They're not just visual, they're audio. Like, it's playing with your ears, y'all. Sorry, go ahead.
You're good. And aside from protest, one thing I try to do is right the wrongs that our industry has committed in the past. For example, let me back up. Type designers used to steal from each other constantly. So in 1850, this font company in France made this font that was stolen by a font company in Boston, and all they did was change the letter M. They kept it the same, just changed the letter M. That company got bought in 1890, and the company that bought them re-released this font in 1933 and named it Jim Crow. So that kind of made me mad a little bit and disappointed in the industry. So I actually remade this font and renamed it after Ruby Bridges, who pretty much ended Jim Crow, to turn something that was meant to be stereotypical and harmful to something that can empower us. And I'm hoping to do that with other fonts in the future. I recently found out, just to show you how powerful type can be and type boundaries can be. There's actually a font company, I forget what their name is, but they actually created the runaway slave illustrations that you see on every runaway slave ad from back in the day. Just type can be powerful, and depending on how you use it, it can be either empowering or harmful. So looking.
Wait, dig into that a bit. So you're saying that there was a font design company that created the ads.
No, the illustration
for runaway. Yeah, talk about that a little bit here.
Yeah, most definitely. So back in the day, font foundries didn't just sell fonts or letters. They also sold illustrations that you can purchase and use in your ads or your newspapers or whatever you wanted. And for example, those ornate certificates with those beautiful borders, they would sell those. They would sell illustrations of bald eagles to use on fancy letterheads and things like that. And some of these illustrations included illustrations of runaway slaves. Some of them were for large runaway slave signs or billboards, and some were super small for newspaper ads that people would take out. Just to show you how powerful type can actually be. And I want to somehow, I'm still working on exactly how to figure that out, but somehow turn those symbols into symbols of empowerment, just like I did with VTC Ruby, and how I can expand upon that for other cultures. Because there are, in fact, stereotypes in typography. There are for example, taking in something that looks Arabic and making it look like English. That's part of stereotypography, by basically breaking down a culture's stereotype into a font that people use. And so I'm working to actually turn those into symbols of power like I did with VTC Ruby. So diversifying my references also involves looking at the harm that the industry has done in the past and hopefully making it right.
I want to add a little bit to the history that Tre was sharing. So Tre talked about how 2005 is sort of our first recorded Black type designer. I think, is that Josh Darden? Is that who that is?
Exactly.
Yep. Shout out to Josh Darden. But Black hands have been in type design in American history for hundreds of years. So taking a step back to what Tre was saying about font foundries and then working with hot metal. So you're pouring hot metal, you're carving out these tiny things. Think about the size of a letter on just like a typical piece of paper. So this is grueling work. It's not very fun to do. And it's arduous and it's tedious and it takes a toll on your body. Guess who was not trying to do that work? The white designers of that type were not trying to do that work. And so a lot of these foundries were these large buildings that employed is absolutely the wrong word. Enslaved and used the free labor of Black folks. And I want to take a moment and speak to who those people were. I think often, for whatever reason, in sort of the American history, our collective consciousness about slaves, we think of them as just sort of these bodies that did not have minds and did not have skills. But so many of the folks that were brought over on the Middle Passage were skilled laborers. These were artisans. These were jewelry makers. These were blacksmiths. These were weavers, calligraphers. These people had skills, and that was the reason that a lot of them were brought into these foundries. So much of old metal type, and probably wood type as well, was carved by Black hands. Black people are involved in those stories and histories, but they weren't allowed to take credit for their work. And they certainly weren't allowed to design the type, right? And a lot of those people, when there was the Emancipation Proclamation and we sort of started in the Jim Crow era, a lot of those people had to hide those skills because they would literally be tracked down and killed and bullied into silence. So that is part of the reason why Black type design has not, we don't sort of see historic Black type designers because those people were actively silenced and excluded from recorded history. But part of me is also like, so many of these fonts like Garamond and these older fonts that we still use today, our ancestors are embedded in those things, right? The way that type has evolved in part, or the type that we see today in part is carrying the spirit of those artisans and those craftspeople. So I don't know, it's bittersweet, and it's also another reason to credit your designers, credit the people that you work with. so that going forward, their names can be carried forward and people can know that we were here.
I also wanted to add a little bit in terms of research, like when I'm working on branding or if I'm working on a project that I have the privy to create the narrative. One of the places that I like to go to is the Ndikra symbol and other indigenous symbols and the Yoruba culture, right? Because as Black people, we were made to hate our past, where we come from, voodoo, Yoruba, Santeria, all these things like that. So for me, it's another way for me to go back and bring that. And when I have this weird name on a project, what's that? Great. This is where it comes from. So these are other ways that, you know, that I use and we have access to use and bring in those cultures that are normally like people just pass over. And so, you know, that's like one of my first go-tos. Like, what am I trying to say? Is there an Ndikra symbol or some type of African story or Yoruba culture that I could pull into that? And I pull into that, I don't care who I'm designing for. And everybody's getting this education lesson today. And so, and I also wanted to highlight what they were saying about crediting, you know, the designers, the people that are doing the work. And that's something that's like really kind of like, it's like a pain point for me. And, you know, because like it helps everyone, right? To say, hey, this person did this work, this project. It doesn't take away from it, but it also helps to amplify that person. So people are aware of who's doing the work and and getting more work. And also people become aware of other types of design that may not be like, oh, here, like I don't look at any type of trends and, oh, this is the trend thing that everyone's using. I don't like to go to any of those references. I like to go to like more indigenous things and stories and see how I could pull that in.
This has been an amazing conversation. You all are, I think that's a beautiful note for us to wrap on and to make sure that people understand exactly what it means to decolonize our eye. You're going back to what some of you were saying, search for different viewpoints, search for different reference points, search for the people who will give you something more than what you think you need for your work. And those are designers of the global majority. So there's that. And also to understand exactly the hidden voices in creating the visuals and what it is that you see on a consistent basis. So I want to encourage everybody to do that. We will, of course, afterwards post information that you all gave as far as where to find some Black designers. But the last question I'm going to have for you, and then I'm going to ask you to end that by telling us where we can find you. Last question is this one, having to do with the theme of our project. So the theme of our project is building Black utopias, transforming red lines into green spaces. And specifically what we're doing is we are amplifying the true, beautiful stories of joy in our historic Black neighborhoods. So what is your idea of a utopia? So we'll start with Niki, then we'll go to Schessa, and then we'll go to Tre.
So we're seeing our idea and then where you can find us.
So what's your idea of a utopia, and then close with how people can find you.
When you said that utopia, I'm just thinking unicorns, you know, like just whatever's different. I love, like, you know, when I come across new music, new dance forms, new design, new art, you know. So to me, a utopia is bringing all of the things that we may feel, you know, like going outside of what we feel we know and trying to see what can we connect to, or who can we connect to bring something different. So I may know this amount of people, but somebody else may know this spectrum of people. And so collaborating, you know, consciously collaborating with diverse people and organizations of different levels to bring that all together in one space. So if I'm, you know, creating an art show or curating an experience, I'm consciously diversifying space by who I'm bringing into the project to work with me. I'm not just only going to do, like I did a women's art show and someone said, oh, all the artists are women, right? No, it's actually not. There's some men, you know? So having all of those different things in one space, getting people out of the norms and what they're used to, then people are like, oh my God, I love this space. It just feels so blah, blah. And it's just like, yeah, because this is what we should be leaning into, where everyone gets highlighted, and seeing some people that may need a boost. Where people can find me Since we're on Instagram, this is I'm live on Niki Lopez Creative with an underscore and Niki with 1K. So that's more of like my design, my projects that I do, curations and things like that. I have another page, Niki Lopez 19. That's more like my art and everything. And then I have a project, What's Your Elephant? So that's the project that uses the arts to create a safe space to address everything unspoken. And recently, Niki Fit 19, because I'm working on my health and fitness and wealth and just wanted a space where, you know, I don't want to overwhelm the Niki Lopez 19 with, and here are 10 videos of me swimming and Black Mermaid. So I have that space. So those are the three spaces. Those are the four spaces, three main spaces, but the four spaces that people could find me. But, you know, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. Pretty much if you look up Niki Lopez with 1K, you can find me somewhere.
Thank you. Schessa?
Yeah, my idea of utopia is a couple of different things. I think the first one I'll say is that we return to being more deeply connected with the earth and its cycles. I think humans seeing ourselves as separate from nature has been the root of a lot of our problems, but not all of them. And so the second part for me of utopia is that we all have what we need, regardless of age, race, ability, gender and sexuality. All of the isms no longer exist, and we all just get to bring our full selves to each aspect of our lives and be met with welcome and joy and abundance. And I write about that a little bit in my in the anthology of near futurism writing. So I can't wait to share that with you guys. But in terms of where you can find me, you can find me at this handle at @the_Schessa. You can see more about my work on Instagram at firebrand.house. And you can also see more of my work on my studio website, which is www.firebrand.house. And both of those are linked in my my Instagram bio.
Thank you, Schessa. And Tre.
I mean, it's hard to top Chessa's answer. But aside from that, I guess I can speak to it from an industry perspective. My idea of a utopia is essentially equality, whether it be in industry and acceptance. So, for example, when I think of equality in an industry, that means, for example, 15% of America is Black, then 15% of all designers in America should also be Black, or 15% of all fashion designers, architects, whomever, or whatever industry. That's what equality looks like to me, and from an industry perspective, that is what I believe a utopia would look like. You can find me at vocaltype.co on Instagram, and that is also my website, vocaltype.co.
This has been an honor and a pleasure. I agree with all of you. We hope our utopia is both equitable. Everyone gets what they need. Everybody feels honored and acknowledged and valued. And I think we can find that in our historic Black neighborhoods. So we're bringing everybody to our historic beach in South Florida, and we're celebrating the stories. And you all three of you, I am very, very grateful to all three of you for what you have contributed to this project. We couldn't have done it without you. It's not going to be anything beautiful without you. And I feel like my eyes were decolonized by working with all of you. And Joshua Darden has some work in our those are the other fonts. You all designed some fonts. Joshua's house designed the other fonts as well. So we got all three of you as far as the font designers.
Before we wrap and you forget, if you're watching this, not only follow Nerissa's Instagram, but Juneteenth for Joy has an Instagram that needs some love.
Okay, so as I say, Niki Lopez has gathered us, and as you can see, the visuals here are just a delight. You guys are amazing. I very nourished by this conversation. So any of you who are following, yes, please follow Juneteenth for Joy. The project Building Black Utopias goes past Juneteenth. We are continuing to seek out stories from people who are in beautiful Black neighborhoods and who want to share the stories. So you can go to juneteenthforjoy.com to find out how to help us build Black utopias. So thank you very much for your time, and have a lovely afternoon or evening or morning or whenever it is that you see this.